Well, Mr. Richardson, why don't you talk about your family history a little bit? That I know you say you're first generation in Acworth, but you've got some family names that go way back in Cobb County, Chalker among others.
Yes, I do, Dr. Scott. I have several branches of my family that came to Cobb County. Some of them back in the 1840s. My Richardson line moved here in the 1840s from South Carolina.
Is that right?
Yes. And then also the Chalker line, they came here just following the Civil War. Many of them settled in Kennesaw, others in Marietta, which is where I was born and raised, was in Marietta.
Well, we've got Chalker Road.
Yes. Chalker Road, Chalker Elementary School. And then
I know, which part of the county did the Richardsons settle in?
the Richardsons settled in sort of northeast, north central Cobb County over in the Blackwell Road area.
Really?
Yes. So they were farmers and carpenters. You know, most people that moved to the county back in those days were farmers. So there's a large farming population here. They also have the Alexander family. They were dairy farmers here in Cobb County, down in the Austell Road area.
Okay.
And then the Jones family also that moved here prior to the Civil War, and they were located out in the Mackland area, and that family was one of the founders of the Methodist Church there at Mackland.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. Well, you know, it seems like everybody that we talked to got here from somewhere else, not that long ago, and so you've got you're one of the real Cobb Countyans, I guess, from the very beginning.
Yes.
Almost.
Yes.
Second decade.
Absolutely. And I love being in Cobb County and can't think of anywhere else I'd want to move to.
What brought you to Acworth?
Well, back in the late 70s, my wife and I were looking for a place to buy a house. We'd been living in Marietta. We'd gotten married in the early 70s, had a couple of children, and we needed a little bit bigger place, a house where they could grow up. And my wife saw a newspaper ad for some new homes that were being developed in Acworth. So we decided to come up and take a look, and we ended up buying a house in Acworth and moved here.
Okay.
At first, I was working in Marietta and driving back and forth to Acworth every day. I thought to myself, what have I done? It takes me 20 minutes to go back and forth to work now.
A long commute.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to Marietta. You're a Marietta High School graduate?
Yes, class of 1971. We're having our 50th anniversary this year.
Oh, how about that?
Yes.
And my high school is having its 60th anniversary this year, but we're doing it by Zoom.
Oh, really? Who would have thought 10 years ago we'd be doing everything by Zoom?
I had never heard of Zoom before the pandemic.
Right. Most people haven't.
So 71, and I wanted to ask you, since you've been so involved with youth sports and high school sports, were you involved in sports at Marietta High School?
No, actually, I was not really involved in high school sports. I enjoyed sports when I was in what was called junior high at that time. I guess they call that middle school, and played football in junior high school. But when I got to Marietta High, I did not really go in for athletics at all.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you were working all the time, maybe, if you were in the family business. Talk about Richardson Bicycle Shop.
Yes, we had a family business. Just after the First World War, my grandfather was working as a carpenter for W.P. Stevens in Marietta, who was a home builder at that time. And an opportunity came up for him to buy a little bicycle shop that was there in Marietta. So in 1918, he purchased the shop, and it's been in the family from then until It closed in 1982.
Where was it located in Marietta?
It was located at 4 different places. When he first purchased it, it was located on Cherokee Street behind where the Strand Theater is now.
Yeah.
That was well before the Strand Theater was built.
Yeah.
Then he moved to...
There was a grocery store there too, wasn't there? A Dunn's or...
Yeah, there was a grocery store there. I can't recall the name.
And then down from that?
Yes. And then...
About where House of Lou is now, I guess.
He has... he moved over to Mill Street.
Yeah.
Just 2 doors down from the railroad tracks on Mill Street.
Okay.
And he was there from the 1920s up into the 1950s.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, my grandfather had sort of semi-retired. My father took over the business. And in the late 50s, he moved the business to Powder Springs Street, just down from the Murray House near the railroad crossing.
Yeah.
And was there for several years, and then he decided instead of having a building on the square and paying rent, he wanted to build his own building and move into it. So he built one on Lawrence Street near Fairground Street, and he was
Lawrence at Fairground?
Lawrence at Fairground Street.
Okay.
There was for many years there was a Hess.
That was way out.
Yes, a mile from the square, and there was a Hess gas station on the corner, then Powell's Barber Shop, and then he was located next door to that.
Okay.
So, and he was there, and then I took over the business later on, and then we were there until 1982 when we decided to close the business.
Okay. Let's see, Lassiter Drug Company, you worked for them in high school also?
Yes, I worked in the evenings and delivered drugstore prescriptions. So I got to meet a lot of interesting people, and during that time.
Where was Lassiter Drugs?
Lassiter Drug at that time was at the corner of Roswell Street and Fairground Street.
Okay.
There's a brick building that's still there now. The Masonic Lodge is on top, and Lassiter's was on the bottom floor.
Oh, below the Masonic Lodge?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So I worked there for a couple of years and really enjoyed that.
Wow. And then you also were a disc jockey. Was that about this time? Up in Cartersville. What kind of programs did they have at WKRW?
Well, it was a daytime only radio station. They signed on the air each day at sunrise and signed off at sunset. And they played a variety of music depending on the time of day.
Yeah.
They played some country music, and they played some rock and roll music, and then we had a lot of news and sports also.
Yeah. What kind of music did you play?
Some of both. So whatever the need was for, doing that, creating advertisements for the radio.
Yeah. It was a long commute to go up to Cartersville.
Yes, it was, but it was something I enjoyed doing, and I had thought about making a career of that until being in the business for a while, I found out that to move up the chain in the radio broadcasting business, you have to move a lot and keep working up to different stations, and I decided that wasn't for me. I wanted to stay at home.
Okay. What kind of music did you prefer personally?
I like the rock and roll music from the 50s and 60s. So that is my favorite. And although we didn't play it at the radio station, I also like some old-time country music and also some bluegrass music.
I'm wondering, 1971, I'm trying to picture, did you have long hair or a beard or any of those things?
I didn't have a beard, but I did have a mustache, and my hair was probably down touching my shoulders at that time. So I tell people that I used up my whole allotment of hair then and don't have any left for now.
Okay. Did you give Becca a picture of what you looked like back then for?
I don't think I gave her one of those pictures.
Well, we need one of those.
I think I have one.
There's probably a lot of people that don't want to remember what they looked like back then.
True.
Everybody had longer hair back then.
Yes, that's right. It was the style. So.
Okay, so how did you get to the Bell and Howell job from the bicycle shop?
Well, that's an interesting story there. At that time, my wife was working at a bank in Marietta. It's called Cobb Exchange Bank, and later I think became First Bank and Trust Company. And she was working there in their bookkeeping department. So one day, the serviceman came in to service the machine that she was using. It was a machine that processed the checks that had been deposited and put them with your statement and returned it to you in the mail. And he was talking to her about how they were shorthanded and needed some employees. And then they got to talking, and it turns out that this guy was a cousin of mine. So she told him where I was at, said that I might be interested in doing that kind of work. I'd been going back to school studying electronics at that time. And
you went to what, today's Chattahoochee Tech, I believe.
Yes, yeah. I think it was called Marietta Cobb Area Votech back in those days. And so anyway, he ended up, after he left his service call there, he came 2 blocks down the street to the bicycle shop to talk to me and said they were looking for people that had both electronics training and were mechanically inclined to work on these mail processing machines. So I told him I was interested and went in to talk to him and ended up being hired. So it's funny how sometimes things just come together.
So you were already thinking about closing the bicycle shop?
Yes, we had been thinking about that for a couple of years. This was in the late 70s and early 80s. We had the period of economic uncertainty and very high inflation.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult on small businessmen.
Double-digit inflation.
Yes,
every year for a
absolutely.
while.
Interest rates on homes were at all-time highs.
Yeah.
So we made the tough decision that it was time to go on and move to something else. And it ended up being something that I did for the next 34 years. So it worked out as a good move for me.
Yeah, I remember we had a 9.5% mortgage interest rate.
Oh yeah, and some people were
Late
even higher than
70s.
that. Yes. Oh, it's difficult times for folks.
It's incredible to think that nowadays,
Yes.
that we pay that much. Well, okay, so Bell and Howell, but you didn't actually move away to work for Bell and Howell, I gather.
No, Bell and Howell operates in the field mostly because you have customers that buy this mail processing equipment for their business. So you end up having a lot of field service engineers that locate in Atlanta area and then go out to different cities across the state to service the equipment. So I was able to, regardless of where my territory happened to be at that time, I was able to commute to my job every day.
Yeah. Commute to where?
It depended on my assignment at the time. I've been anywhere from working in the Fulton Industrial Boulevard area to Alpharetta to south of Atlanta to Conyers to Chattanooga, you name it.
Okay.
I've been all over the.
So some overnight trips since.
Occasionally some, yes, and some out-of-town things for training schools and things like that. But mostly I got to stay at home.
Yeah. So 34 years with Bell and Howell.
Yes, yes, it was a great 34 years. I got to do a lot of different things and meet a lot of people in different companies and industries, and I enjoy it very much. Still keep in touch with the old guys, and we have a monthly luncheon that we have.
Good. Well, talk about what Acworth was like back in the 1980s and that period.
Well, when I moved to Acworth in 1980, I think Acworth still had a decent business community in the downtown. but it was starting to wane. And we saw the malls come in and start causing local merchants to lose their businesses, and we saw a decline in downtown. There were still some great businesses. I remember one in particular that was a bakery that was on Main Street that I used to love to go to the bakery and get a few things. But this was still Acworth prior to the realignment of Cherokee Street and Dallas Street, where the railroad crossing used to be at that time. And that was moved later a little south to Lemon Street. But a small town. I think in 1980 the population was about 3,500. It had decreased from the prior census. The prior census had been about 4,000 people. So Acworth was decreasing in size. And then the business communities had difficulty here, and we saw most of the businesses on Main Street over the next decade just slowly fade away.
So town center had an impact on it?
Yeah, town center certainly had an impact. You also saw relocation of businesses, and some new businesses locating out near I-75, which had been completed in the 1970s, and we saw things like Kmart open out there at I-75 and Cherokee Street. And of course that business is now long gone, and the building's no longer there. But it was a difficult time for the Acworth business community.
Well, how did you get involved in politics in Acworth?
Well, politics kind of fell on me after I got involved in youth sports here in activity in Acworth. So I had 3 sons, and as a result, I ended up being around football, baseball, track, basketball, all these sports as the kids wanted to play those. And I had gotten involved with those organizations. And I was very heavily involved with the Acworth Football Association. And in fact, I coached there, and I was a board member there. And we had a liaison with the city of Acworth, Bob Gibson, who was an alderman at that time, and later on was elected mayor. And he met with us on a regular basis, and the city provided some services for the organization, such as they provided the lights for the field that we played on. They came in and cut the grass for us. But pretty much other than that, it was a volunteer-run organization. And if there were improvements made at the field, the parents got together and did that themselves. And we ran the leagues ourselves. And it came to a point where one day Bob Gibson came to us and said, listen, the city's lawnmower is broken down, and we're not going to be able to cut the grass on the sports fields anymore. So he said, y'all are going to have to start doing it on your own, which we picked up and did. And we carried on like that for a couple of years. And then at that time, Acworth did not have a Parks and Recreation department at all. It was no one staffing that. The little bit of work that was done by the Public Works Department.
Well, I was going to say that it sounded like if they couldn't even afford to keep a lawnmower running, must not have been a very big city government in Acworth.
Well, it was pretty small and ran on a lean budget, so it was difficult for them to make ends meet, I'm sure. But later on, after Bob Gibson was elected mayor, he'd always had an interest in recreation for young people in town. And he wanted to get a recreation department started, and there was some opposition to it on the city council.
Really?
And he came to the association and asked them if there was anyone there that was a city resident that would like to become involved in politics and run for a seat on the Board of Aldermen. And He talked to 2 or 3 people there, and then they finally came and asked me, and he explained the mission. So I was sort of drafted by the rest of the folks there to run for alderman.
Wow.
So, and I did. That was in 1995.
Oh, you ran in 95?
Yes, 1995.
But you didn't get elected in 95?
I did not get elected that year. I ran against an incumbent that year, and I ended up losing the election. And
what were the issues? The recreation? Was that?
Recreation was a big issue, and also we were starting at that time already looking at quality of life for our residents here in Acworth, and wanting to make some changes that would help provide more opportunities for families to settle here and bring their kids here to live.
So the opposition was saying city government's too big already, we don't want to pay the taxes for a recreation department, or what was the case against recreation?
I don't think they thought they could afford to really do recreation at the time. And it's something that could have started small and worked its way up, and it eventually did. But I ended up losing that election. I was disappointed, but I had gone into it completely unfamiliar with city government at all, and by attending, while I was running, attending the city council meetings and things that were going on, I started to pick up an understanding more of how city government worked. So for the next 2 years, I made sure I attended every city council meeting, every other important meeting that went on in the city of Acworth, and learn all I could about city government. So I was a regular around City Hall for the next 2 years.
So you must have enjoyed it, because, I mean, I think I'd shoot myself if I had to sit through Board of Aldermen meetings week after week after week.
Well, it was something I did enjoy, and it was a learning experience. And I learned a whole lot about the city that I didn't know, and some of the issues that the city faced that were probably more important than providing parks and recreation at that time, because you have to keep the streets operational, you have to keep lights and water going, and all of those things too.
So you enjoyed that?
Yes, I enjoyed that. So I decided, I started talking to some of the people on the board, and put out the word that I was interested in running again when the next election came up. And one of the board members at that time, Carlos Sutton, had decided that he did not want to run for election again. He had retired from his job, and he was ready to move on. So he told me about that and let me know that he wasn't going to run, and I decided to run for his seat in the next election. And it turned out that in that election I was unopposed, and went in right away.
All right. Now, and Acworth is kind of unusual in that you run citywide, don't you? Even though it's a particular district that you represent.
Well, all of our districts are at large. We have 5 posts, but every post is a citywide post, and we all run at large. So we have a large number of voters that we have to work with.
So everybody represents the whole city, and
Absolutely.
Everybody runs
Yes.
at large. Did the Civil Rights Act of '65, the Voting Rights Act, not throw a monkey wrench into that? I know in a lot of places you had to create separate wards, or else they would say you're diluting black voting strength. But that was never an issue in Acworth?
It has never been an issue here, and I think that was in large part due to the election of Doyle Hill, who was one of the first blacks elected to a city position in Cobb County.
And that was in the 80s?
I believe that was in the 80s,
So
yes.
before you got there, he was there.
Yes, he was. And I think that had a lot to do with it. So I think that there was representation on the board.
Yeah, okay. So you run without opposition in '98, and and then you've been on there since that time for 24 years.
24 years
now,
come
yes.
January, yes.
Okay.
So
You're in a pretty good position then, I think, to talk about how the county or the city has changed since then, and particularly why don't you start talking about the redevelopment of the downtown area and the role that city government played in kind of bringing the Main Street back.
well, that was something that had already gotten started in the 90s. Acworth had formed an Acworth Downtown Development Authority that was already in place when I came here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was first elected, I was the board liaison to that group.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an active program of trying to promote activities in downtown to bring people to our city.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the idea that if they could attract one successful restaurant to downtown, that could be the start of growing the downtown and redeveloping downtown. And it turns out that during the process, Henry Chandler decided to open his Louisiana Grill here in Acworth. Henry's a local resident, and he had a lot of friends that really encouraged him that he could make it locally, and he opened his first location a little further north on Main Street than he is now, and he was successful. So it was from that point that things started growing a little bit at a time. The Downtown Development Authority put some programs in place too, working with the Historic Preservation Commission. It was a facade grant program where people could get grants from the city to improve the looks of their building on the outside. That was another successful program. We had programs where
Where'd you get the money for the facade grant?
the facade grant money came from city government.
Okay.
It was small amounts, but it was very helpful to small businesses to be able to do that. And then also through the Acworth Downtown Development Authority, it made it possible to have to funnel loans for building redevelopment purposes through the Downtown Development Authority that could be done at a less expensive rate than on the commercial market. So they started a program where people could buy businesses and get business loans at a better rate to encourage businesses. Also, in Cobb County, we have the Cobb County Sewer Department has an impact fee that when a business opens, such as a restaurant, that of course is going to have an impact on the sewer service.
Sure.
And they have an impact fee that's based on the number of seats that you have in your restaurant, the number of people you can serve, and that can be quite substantial when you're looking at opening a restaurant and having to pay that fee. So the Downtown Development Authority used some of their funds that they had available to start a sewer impact fee grant that would help local businesses with that fee that they faced.
Yeah.
So all of that eventually came together, and with a full-time Downtown Development Authority director that we had at that time, they were able to encourage businesses to move to Acworth, and we started seeing a different mix where Main Street before had been primarily businesses like retail shopping and service businesses that would bring people. We started to see the mix change where it would be restaurants and shops that would attract people with different items that they would like to see. So it was a big transformation, but it took place over quite a few years.
How long were you the liaison to the Development Authority?
I think probably about 10 years.
Okay.
I was their liaison, and during that time, they had worked actively on becoming a Georgia Main Street city.
Yeah.
And they were awarded that designation in, I believe, the year 2000, and have maintained that designation ever since. And in 2019, were named a Georgia Exceptional Main Street City. There's only 20 of the cities in Georgia that have achieved that designation.
And what was it that you had to do to get the exceptional? It was something special going on, wasn't it?
I don't recall the details on that.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking it had to do with some kind of well, anyway, we'll let that go. How did historic preservation fit into the mix with downtown development?
I think it's been a very important mix. We've seen some places that have decided that their downtowns were not worth redeveloping, and essentially have rebuilt their downtowns as something different.
Like Smyrna, for instance.
Smyrna is a good example, and it worked greatly for them. But here in Acworth, we had a good historic core. We had the downtown business district, we had many homes, the Collins Avenue Historic District, the Park Street Historic District. We had all of that going for us. So the decision was made that we wanted to maintain our downtown and maintain the small town feel in downtown. And we've worked to keep that in place ever since. That's been the backbone of downtown.
Yeah, okay. What was Amy Lowry's position? Was that Preservation Authority that she was working with?
I don't recall. I remember when Amy was here, and
because I know I was doing some stuff with Amy and with Abbey Parks and so on. So
yes. Amy may have been the downtown development director.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Yes, I think she was.
I think she was too. Okay, so you did that. Now, of course, you were interested in Parks and Recreation when you first ran in '95. When did you become the liaison to Parks and Rec?
That, I don't remember what year. The first assignment I had when I was first elected, Mayor Andruzzi appointed me as liaison to the police department.
Oh, okay.
And I worked with that for a number of years.
Okay.
And
well, I said liaison, but I may be wrong on that with the Parks and Recreation.
well, I have over the years. We have a rotating system that we use now, so that each alderman rotates through the different departments on a regular basis, so we all have experience in each department that we have in the city. For example, this year I'm once again the chairman of our Public Safety Committee, but I'm the vice chairman of Public Works and Power.
Yeah.
And I'll rotate to something else next year.
Right.
So.
Okay. So, well, at any rate, let's go back to Parks and Rec. There wasn't one before '95 at any rate. And then what, late '90s, almost 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago almost.
We had, we ended up early on, one of the things that I wanted to do when I was first elected, and one of the things that was in my platform, was start a recreation impact fee, because we had a lot of new development going on with new housing being built, and a lot of the families that moved here had young children.
Yeah.
And we did not have enough facilities to support the children that were coming in. So we developed a recreation impact fee for each housing unit that was built. The developer had to pay a fee to the city that was designated only to be used for recreation purposes.
Right.
And that remains in place to this day, and we use that for Parks and Recreation purposes. And it helped us start the Parks and Rec program. We ended up hiring one person to start with as a director, and we slowly built up for now. And
Right.
now we have a very vibrant and active Parks and Rec department here. It was run for many years by James Albright, who's now been promoted to our city manager, and is now the Parks and Rec programs are managed by Kim Watt now.
Kim Watt.
Yes.
Oh, and so James is the permanent city manager now?
Yes.
Okay.
He was appointed by us recently, and he has some big shoes to fill. But as I said, James has big feet, and he won't have any problem with doing that.
Yeah. Now, I didn't know whether he was interim or full-time or permanent.
Yes, he is permanent now.
Okay, great. But you had Lake Acworth all along, so you had plenty of recreation here, but no
Well,
recreation.
Well, even with Lake Acworth, there were problems there. When I came on board, Lake Acworth, the beach, was closed to the public.
Yeah.
There had been some pollution problems in the lake, and the board had been working over the past several years. I think the beach actually closed in 1992, and the pollution problems had to be resolved, and they finally were. And I think in 1998, that summer, was when the beach was officially reopened.
Okay.
And we started having some programs there again. So that was great to see. That started the concert series that goes on to this day at Acworth Beach. So we have thousands of people that come out every year to enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, it's astounding how much land is devoted to parks in Acworth. I don't know of a city its size anywhere that has more land devoted to parks, does it?
Well, not that I'm aware of, and as the mayor likes to say, we have the most green space devoted to parks and recreation of any city in the state. We have several beaches. We have facilities here in the middle of town. We have a beautiful Logan Farm Park right here in the middle of the city that stretches from the north end of the city to the south.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about a number of the things that I had on my list, but we haven't really talked about either Public Safety Committee or the Power and Public Works Committee. Why don't we start with Public Safety and talk about what you've done as chair of that committee and your relationship with the police department and what have you?
Well, that's something that I've really enjoyed working with over the years is public safety. When I was first on board, I was very disappointed to learn that our police department had police officers that were among the lowest paid in the metro area. We had police officers that started out barely making above minimum wage. At that time, the city did not supply weapons for the police officers. They had to supply their own weapons.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
If they had a bulletproof vest, they had to buy their own. So,
Wow.
so over the years, we were able to get a state grant to provide vests for officers back then, so they could work in safety. We had a antiquated radio system that in some parts of the city would not allow police officers to talk back to the police station. So we instituted a lot of changes, and the board decided that we needed to develop a very professional police department. And over the years, it's taken a lot of time to do that. We've had several people that have been police chief here and contributed greatly to that effort. And now our police department is state certified by the state of Georgia. Only about 10% of the departments in the state receive that accreditation. And Chief Dennard is very well recognized is a great leader in our police department. We're very community-oriented.
Great. Power and Public Works Committee. Who's the chair of that committee?
The chairman of that committee this year is Tim Houston.
Okay.
And I really enjoy working with Tim. And the head of the department, Angie Luna, has been with us just within the past couple of years. She's come on board. So Acworth, like Marietta, has its own power system that supplies power for most of the citizens in Acworth. And in addition to the power department, of course, we have the streets to maintain, stormwater issues to deal with, and but we do not have water and sewer. The city had a water and sewer system many years ago, and the decision was made well before my time to sell that system to Cobb County, who now operates the water and sewer system.
Probably makes more sense to do it county-wide, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it works out great.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, you were a graduate of the Citizens Police Academy also, is that?
Yes, that was a program that was put in place a number of years ago to help our citizens learn more what it's like to be a police officer and see the issues that they face every day. And it's been a very helpful program. It allows the community to get to know some of our police officers, and they have the graduates of the academy to get to go for a ride along with a police officer and see how they conduct business.
Yeah. Right.
So I've been through that course twice, and I'll probably go through it again at some point.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, I guess, a little bit away from city government, I guess, but I jotted down that you're a staff sergeant, Georgia State Defense Force.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes. The Georgia State Defense Force is part of Georgia's Department of Defense. In Georgia, the Department of Defense is made up of the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the Georgia State Defense Force. Okay. The Georgia State Defense Force is the unpaid, all-volunteer branch.
Okay.
We do not get paid for our service. We work with the National Guard on some things like OPFOR training, which is opposing force training, which they receive before they go overseas for deployments. We have State Defense Force troops who go in and they play the opposing force in a war game type situation to help train them.
Yeah.
We also respond in the aftermath of natural disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes. We worked during the pandemic, for example, servicing food banks throughout the state, working with the National Guard and decontaminating nursing homes around the state.
Yeah.
So we have a wide variety of missions.
And you've worked with the U.S. Selective Service System for a number of years?
Yes, I was appointed to that position. Governor Busby had nominated me for the position, and then President Reagan appointed me to the position back in that would have probably been about 1979 or so.
Post-draft.
Post-draft. What had happened is that following the Vietnam War, there was no longer a draft, and the Selective Service System still existed, but it was dormant. President Reagan decided that the Selective Service System needed to have a backbone in place in the event that a war should occur and the draft have to be reinstituted, that the mechanism to do that would already be in place. So the local boards were all appointed across the United States, and we received training and an annual training following that. And each member was allowed to serve, but you have to retire after 20 years of that service. So, I could only serve 20 years.
Well, now, did you have a military background? I didn't see that.
No, I did not. I came along
Right at the end.
right at the very end of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And I had looked at possibly a career in the Air Force at that time, also in electronics. I was very much into electronics as a hobby at that time. And I had an uncle who advised me that with the way things were shaping up, with the downsizing that would occur with the military following a war like Vietnam, that was probably not a good opportunities for the military to advance for a few years. So I decided not to pursue that at that time.
Yeah.
Then after 2001, my son had joined the Marine Corps, and he ended up being deployed to both Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh my goodness.
And I was looking at some way that I could serve again, but at that point, I was too old to join the regular Army. And that's when I found out about the Georgia State Defense Force, who accepts people you can join up to the age of 65.
Wow. Okay. We also skipped over you were a Boy Scout, Order of the Arrow. What is that?
The Order of the Arrow is a group of Boy Scouts that are dedicated to learning about camping and outdoor activities, and you are elected by members of your troop, or in my case at that time, Explorer Post, to the Order of Arrow. And then they have an ordeal ceremony that you have to go through, and then if you pass the ordeal ceremony, then you are they have what's called a tap-in ceremony where you're inducted into the Order of the Arrow. So it was quite an honor for me to join that.
Yeah. And by the way, I should have said that back in the 60s, you were featured in the Atlanta Times newspaper, putting flags out in the National Cemetery as a Boy Scout.
Yes, I had just joined a Boy Scout troop. It was at the one at St. James Episcopal Church in Marietta. And that was one of the things that they did each year, was go to the Marietta National Cemetery and put flags on the graves of the fallen soldiers. So a fellow Boy Scout, Steve Horton, and I were doing that. We were going along putting out our flags when a photographer came up and wanted to make our pictures. So we said, okay, and he took our picture, and Steve said, well, let's not tell anybody about this. So we decided we were going to keep it secret. And but of course, the next day when the newspaper came out and our pictures were on the front page, it wasn't secret anymore, and our parents were saying, well, why didn't you tell us?
Good question.
So, and I don't know why. It's just one of those things that boys decide to do.
Right. Well, why don't you just talk a little bit, maybe as we come to a close, about the changes in Acworth and where you see Acworth nowadays?
Well, we've had a great program over the past 20 years with really stressing quality of life in Acworth. We have done a great job with that. We have a city team that, and it really is a team. All of the Board of Aldermen, Mayor Alligood, we all work as a team to get these things accomplished. And we have a great city staff that's a part of that team and helps us with that too. Our first focus was on our downtown area. And as you can see, sitting here in this new community center and with all the road improvements and parks, we've been very successful at that. We've recruited new businesses to downtown. Acworth is now a vibrant place to be at night, whereas back in 1980 98, the streets rolled up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you didn't see a car downtown. Now, Acworth is a destination and where people like to go and shop and dine. And we have kids coming to downtown to work here in the recreation center and enjoy basketball and other sports. So now we're going to start turning our focus further out into our city as we can start interconnecting our neighborhoods to this core downtown that we've built. So I think we're going to see a lot of focus on that with sidewalks and trails over the next 20 years that are going to connect all the outlying subdivisions. And with that, we're going to make it a golf cart friendly city where people can have golf carts and travel into downtown and enjoy the downtown. So we hope to continue to work together as a team and keep the team effort going and keep doing good things for the citizens here.
Well, anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to add to the interview?
No, I guess
about your kids or wife or anything? Or?
Well, yes, let me say that my wife, Marty, has been very supportive of me. I spent a lot of time away from home, and I think she has a little to-do list for me to accomplish that's going to take me about 20 years to do.
Okay.
So, but I think it might be a while before I get started on that.
All right.
And all of my children, as I mentioned, my one son that was in the military, the others are all grown, and the two of them live here in Georgia in this vicinity, and the other one in Oklahoma. So the only other thing I'd like to say is a thank you to Dr. Scott for what you have done for Save Acworth History Foundation in conducting these interviews. This is going to be something that people can look back 20, 40, 50 years from now, and even longer, and get a little bit of what Acworth was like and the people that helped make our community what it is. We thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.